What the bloody hell are you buggers doing out here?
In this world, there's people like me. And there's people like you.
Did you get hit?
And people like me eat people like you. Mick Taylor's a name. Big shirter and Outback legend.
Did you gear the film at all to your international audience? You really turned up to 11 the Australianness of the Ockerness of Mick Taylor.
Well, most people, when we were making it, a lot of people were nervous about that because this was one of the things about the first film. People were kind of a bit taken aback by just how Aussie and how blatant, how kind of, in a weird kind of way, of celebration of Australiana it was. But my feeling has always been that would be the thing that makes it stand out in the international landscape. So the answer to the question is, no, it's kind of the opposite of trying to make it appeal to international audiences because the market's so crowded. So I think that the thing to do, when making a film, if you're not in America, is to just make it completely as different as you possibly can. And also take the things of your own culture that no one else can do. Do you know what I mean? Because there are millions of people out there doing horror action films and all kinds of stuff. But, for me, it's the thing about saying what's the unique thing about Australia and Wolf Creek and that character and make it about that. That's the texture of the thing that kind of makes it stand out. That's exactly right. I mean, it's a long time since the first movie, and so much has happened in my life, and so I'm a different filmmaker now, and I'm actually interested in different kind of films and things cinematically. So for me, it was a chance to explore what was interesting about the first film, which was to me the character of Mick Taylor, who he was, and what kind of was the engine for that kind of personality. And then cinematically, I thought no one wants to see another torture porn movie, least of all me. So I thought, well, I've always really been fascinated with that idea with suspense, like pure suspense and pure storytelling through pictures. So my thinking was just make a really simple, very pure storyline that really relied on sort of cinematic storytelling, which was just really something that I've always wanted to sort of go with and play with, and then wove the Wolf Creek, true stories and the Wolf Creek kind of idea around that.
What kind of filmmaker are you now? Would you make a Wolf Creek now?
Well, I guess the answer to that question is that you've just seen the Wolf Creek that I would make now versus the one I made many years ago. The first film was basically a very, it was a raw kind of hand grenade of the film. That part of the kind of energy of that film was the frustration of me having spent so long not being able to get a film up, and it all, it had perfect kind of expression in this very brutal, violent little film that, it took a few tricks from other filmmakers I've been learning about how to create suspense and how to kind of create things with genuine impact. So the second movie is it's much different in lots of ways, and I guess it goes back to kind of having perspective on the first film and then also being able to throw that out, because the real thing was that I realized early on that I was competing with my own film. I was competing with the kind of cult status that Wolf Creek 1 had. So I really had to basically make decisions about saying, well, that's that film, and I'm kind of competing with this younger filmmaker who is myself. What do I do now in terms of basically make something that's interesting, that's worth seeing, that doesn't feel like it's a retread, and also expresses what I'm personally interested into, which I'm still fascinated with basic kind of thriller and suspense kind of movies.
So are you looking to make more thriller-based, suspense-based, Hitchcock-type films now?
At the moment, my interests are very, very wide-ranging in terms of genre. I think what I mean more specifically is about, in terms of doing a Wolf Creek movie, there are many different genres and styles you can do a horror film in, and this one specifically was focused on suspense and ratcheting up that tension.
The opening sequence makes it pretty clear that you want us to like Mick Taylor. Why? Why did Mick click with people?
It's a good question, and everyone will have their own theories. Look, I think, for me, I think that opening sequence really is about, on the one hand, it is putting audiences on Mick's side in a very kind of strange kind of way. And I think that's the reason that kind of scene is there is because it really, that first scene kind of summarizes, in a sense, the thematic ideas that are bubbling under the film, which is about how a character like Mick could exist, and what's the basis of a character like that. So a sequence in which, a character who really doesn't like authority and really, really doesn't like authority in a major way immediately speaks to the Australian character, because we hate authority. We kind of rebel against it very strongly, and we're a very egalitarian society, and that's all about the roots of the country and how we started. So if we start with a scene like that basically says to everyone, oh, okay, this is horrible what he's doing, but the idea is familiar. So that basically the audience is on his side in one sense, which leads to the end sequence, which is really about an investigation of where all that comes from, about the nature of the origin of Australia, the kind of, the subtext beneath our country of these kind of ancient resentments and racist ideas that are really from another time, and Mick kind of embodies those ideas in the present-day character.
What makes a good movie villain?
It's a very good question. I think they have to be based on characteristics that are truthful. And I think that audiences recognize a villain who is basically a kind of amplification of true human emotion and qualities. And I think when you have a great villain, they're instantly recognized around the world, whether it's Darth Vader, Hannibal Lecter, or Anthony Perkins from Psycho, or Mick Taylor. They really are kind of pinpointing particular qualities and amplifying them to an extreme degree. And that's why I think that we recognize them instantly, and we kind of love to hate them. Because maybe there's a bit of those characters in all of us, and that's why we kind of, respond so strongly, I think.
Now, one of the most striking sequences in Wolf Creek 2 is where you illustrate the origins of Roadkill. What inspired inspired this brilliant scene?
Well, I grew up in Bendigo, and and I've done a lot of travelling around Australia, and hit a fair number of roos, and it's just a part of the country that I think is striking that we it's one of these things that happens in Australia. Australia's this bunch of little tiny, these bunch of cities kind of clinging to the coastline, and the interior is this huge kind of open space with these long, long stretches of roads, and on those roads are hundreds of animals that get slaughtered constantly. So I think it's just something that every Aussie understands that happens, and I think that we've all seen it or done it or heard someone hit a mob of kangaroos. But I just thought to myself, I've never seen that. I've never actually seen that on film, and I thought it would be quite amazing to see it, and then also to kind of see how, see the response of someone driving one of those big rigs has to that. And I've spoken to truck drivers, and really kangaroos, basically they just treat them like hitting flies, and it's just like they don't swerve or stop, they just barrel through, and it's kind of I'm sure the truck drivers in the audience will appreciate the kind of the comedy of that scene. It's very black comedy, obviously, but it's part of life out there. I think at that moment it illustrates Paul's response, this sensitive new age young British backpacker who's horrified by the idea of killing one of these kangaroos, but Mick's laughing and just it's to him it's quite funny. And at the end of that he says that line, "Welcome to Australia," and it illustrates the point. It illustrates the idea that for him, this terrain, this chase, everything is this is fun for him, as opposed to the foreigner, which it's horror. The way that the kangaroos respond to the song that Mick is playing, Greg, it is almost like the kangaroos are responding instinctively to something that has become part of their evolutionary cycle, that being made into roadkill is actually something that helps keep the population down. It's like the song's a siren call to them. It's a siren call to the highway. I love it. I love that. I thought I was being subtextual, but you've just taken it to a new level. Why has it taken so long for a film that should have happened probably much quicker? Probably three reasons. One is that, after the first film, I got busy for a couple of years doing another film, Rogue, and that was probably 2 or 3 years. For the next 2.5 years, I was attached to a couple of projects, and they didn't happen. So we're up to 5.5 years. During all this time, though, we did actually have a script early on, and to be honest, it was pretty good. It just wasn't amazing. And so during all this period of doing other projects and working and doing stuff, every now and then, again, my co-writer and I would sit down and say, okay, what do we think is wrong with it? And then probably about 2 years ago, I put it out and said, I think probably about 2.5 years ago, and said, look, if we're going to give it a crack, we really should get onto this because we've been so distracted with other things. And then we sat down, and then I had a quite major breakthrough with the script about what specifically it needed what direction it needed to go into work. And really, it was a screenplay that didn't really have the subtext. It didn't really have the why make this film. But was the real reason I was probably not totally drawn to making it was that it wasn't about anything. It was just a sequel. And so once I locked into what it was about and what the film was about and what we could explore with it, it suddenly became, okay, now I want to make this movie because it's not just a stupid horror film for me. It's actually just it's a vehicle to explore ideas. Now, ironically, though I've just sort of
half complained that the film probably should have come out earlier. The fact that it's coming out now is actually really good timing for the industry. Yes, last year was a lean year in film, but over the last 3 or 4 years, Australian film has really been coming along. There seems to be a growing respect for genre films, and I think one of the measures of a healthy film industry is one that can produce successful sequels to films. What do you reckon?
I agree. I think it's spot on. And I think that it's going to be very interesting to see, how this film plays in Australia and whether people get into the notion of Australian sequel, because there really haven't been that many sequels to any kind of Australian films, let alone horror films. So I'm fascinated to see how people respond to it. But I think it's spot on.
How is Wolf Creek 3 going?
Look, we'll see how Wolf Creek 2 goes.
Greg, you have to finish the trilogy, mate. Either he gets caught, or he gets elected to Parliament, or you make him into a hero, or he becomes redeemed, or you go Wolf Creek the beginning. But you gotta polish off the trilogy, mate.
Interesting. Well, we did, in terms of the prequels, we did do. I co-wrote 2 Wolf Creek prequel novels with the author of the co-writer of Wolf Creek 2 screenplay, Aaron Stearns, and a horror novelist called Greg McLean. So there's 2 Wolf Creek prequel novels out now through Penguin, which basically explore Mick's early life. But, sequels, look, John and I have sort of joked about it and talked about it, and we honestly had a really good time making this movie, because we hadn't worked together for so long, and we got a lot of the, old crew back together, and we had a blast. So we would definitely be up for it. It's really about, as you know, there's only sequels to successful movies. So if Wolf Creek 2 is successful, there's more than likely going to be a 3.
Now, you made the first film for nothing, for like 1.3, 1.4 million. It goes on to take 30 million at the box office, and about that amount again with home market sales. How is it that the director of a film, a $1.3 million film that makes around $60 million, has to scrounge money for years to get the sequel made? From a normal person's point of view, it seems counterintuitive. Can you enlighten us in any way?
I can. When about 2.5 years ago, when we finally decided to put the film into production, we were working on a production budget that was twice the size of the budget the film finally got made for. In the middle of that process, the GFC hit. So basically, the entire way that films are financed, foreign sales, distribution deals, all those things transformed in the space of about 2 weeks. So we basically had to shut down and restructure the entire film to work out a way to make it for a budget that was what the market was now willing to pay for that film. So basically, it was ready to go. And in the middle of that, we lost a major investor, which I'm sure you all know, about.
Jeff Adelson.
So it basically, yeah. So we had a number of those funding problems, they happen a lot to films. We had a couple of those things happen, as well as the nature of the whole financing is changed pretty quickly. So we had to we simply had to just close down at a point where we're literally ready to go, and that took about another 12 months to get ready. So we just had these kind of delays that kind of stacked up and were unfortunate, but oddly, and this is saying this genuinely though, there are things that basically came out of each delay in terms of the script development, in terms of details of design, in terms of things that went into making the final film actually something that I'm very proud of, that happened partly because of those delays. Even things like, locations becoming available, and we were shooting at a better period in the locations rather than others, so it means we could use a different location, and all these weird little things that were knock-on effect that went into making the film what it is, happened because of those delays. Now, would I have rather to have shot it 3 years ago? Yes. But in hindsight, you kind of go, well, actually, this wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened. So it's a bit like casting. You kind of tend to always end up with the right actor for some reason. So maybe this film's a bit like that.